Hello again, and today I regret to tell you that some of these videos might be a little offset. We got some weather up here in the Northeast, and that did throw me off yesterday as I was putting out the big merchandise video. However, we're back on track. We're right on schedule. I still got today to record this, and this might be a fucking big one because, ladies and germs, we're going to be talking today about J.J. Abrams. Now, who is Jeffrey Jacob Abrams, other than the man who helped to direct the 7th film in the Skywalker saga? Well, let's go over his early life. He was the son of a television producer and an executive producer. His sister is a screenwriter by the name of Tracy Rosen. He attended Sarah Lawrence College, following his father's advice, and when that advice being, it's important that you go off and learn what to make movies about how to make movies. And that is so fucking ironic. So ironic, ladies and germs, okay? Because if you know anything about J.J. Abrams and his directing style, you know one thing and one thing only. He loves cribbing from other bigger directors. And what the directors that he cribs from is the actual elements of the fucking story of the movie he's trying to recreate. Now, let's do a little bit of a primer on his career. You might remember the show Felicity. You might remember Alias with sexy-ass Jennifer Garner. You might remember Lost. Those are all executive produced and a lot of episodes directed by J.J. Abrams. What he did not do a lot of is writing. And this keeps going into his career. He directs shit like Office. He writes a couple episodes of Fringe, which I think might be his best show next to Alias. Purse of Interest, Revolution, Almost Human, Believe, 11/22/63 on Hulu. Westworld with Jonathan Nolan, Christopher Nolan's brother. Now, why am I going into his television career? Well, it's very simple. He's better at television than he is at film. And it's really obvious because we need to now transfer over to his film career, in which we have movies like Armageddon that he wrote. He wrote a treatment of Superman film called Superman Flyby, but we're going to come back to that later. He wrote Regarding Henry, Gone Fishing, but he doesn't start directing movies, you see, until the third Mission Impossible movie, where a bunch of people gave him a chance to fucking direct a movie. They saw all this TV stuff he was involved in, was like, this guy's a genius. He's a great producer. Let's make him direct. And what does he do? He cribs from the first movie. He cribs a little bit from John Woo. He cribs a little bit from Spielberg with Indiana Jones. And that's what makes those big, flashy stunt sequences in that movie what it is. But a lot of the actors, I feel like, were on autopilot, especially the non-experienced ones, like Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, Maggie Q. But people like Tom Cruise, autopilot. Philip Seymour Hoffman, turned up the gain, still autopilot. Ving Rhames, he is that character from the other two movies, so he can go on autopilot. And everyone else is also on autopilot, except for the one standout role in Simon Pegg, and that will move into his next film that he directs. But in the meantime, he has his big production company, Bad Robot, that's responsible for shit like Lost and Alias. But what comes from the dome is Cloverfield. This idea of a kind of kaiju movie set in America, but done better than like Godzilla 2000 for the American audience anyway. And it's one of these like crazy found footage movies, and it really takes off with American audiences. And people think that J.J. Abrams directed that movie, but it's really Matt Reeves, the guy who's currently directing Batman as I talk about shit with movies. He directed Let Me In, the remake of Let the Right One In. He directed, I believe, the two best Planet of the Apes movies, War and Dawn. He also, directed Cloverfield. So that is Matt Reeves' tiny little career being thought of as J.J. Abrams. And so J.J. Abrams directs Star Trek, and it's very interesting if you are a Star Trek fan. I myself am more of a Jedi than I am a Trekkie. Even though Trekkie is like really mean to call Trekkers, but I like Trekkie because it makes sense. It's kind of corny. The Star Trek aesthetic that he brought into his version was entirely cribbed from Star Wars. That movie feels like if you just trade the names of a bunch of characters, it could be like a Star Wars spin-off. And it's nonsensical for the Star Trek fan. It's really fun for the normie. And he was able to then say, hey, I can direct. I can direct good. And so he takes his Cloverfield idea, kind of puts the monster into his next movie, Super 8, which is basically E.T. meets Cloverfield. And it's not shot like that. Larry Fong did an incredible job doing like some very old school Spielbergian type of stuff. But again, it's like E.T. meets Close Encounters meets Cloverfield. It's just a pastiche. There's nothing really original about what made that movie. And then the next movie he does really shows how he has no brain. And it's Star Trek Into Darkness, which is essentially a pastiche remake of Space Seed, the first Khan appearance in Star Trek, and obviously Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. And the writers of both of the Star Trek films and Mission Impossible 3, Roberto Orci and Alex Kurtzman, were, I don't want to call them scabs, but they definitely were involved in two movies that were essentially remakes of better movies from the 1980s. One being Into Darkness, and the other being Transformers 2: Revenge of the Fallen. And the reason why I say that is because they both cribbed the incredibly culturally iconic moments of not only Spock dying, but Optimus Prime dying in the movie, the Transformers movie from 1986. And as a result, these guys now have a fucking like big career, and it's because they wrote one semi-original Star Trek movie that isn't really that original. It is more like a Star Wars version of Star Trek. And even though I like Star Trek 2009, and that's what got me into Star Trek on the whole, it is a big problem for a lot of the major of the fandom. And this is where we get into me talking about The Force Awakens in a lot more detail than I did in my my initial video. So I was not really all that excited for J.J. Abrams based on this track record. I could tell that this guy didn't really have an original bone in his body, but I was willing to give it a shot if the right people were writing. And of course, Lawrence Kasdan was announced to write The Force Awakens, and it really felt like it was part of the puzzle piece, and that Lawrence Kasdan was going to have respect for Star Wars because he had worked on Star Wars. This is not the case, because if Lawrence Kasdan had respect for Star Wars, he would have been writing some books and realizing that I have so much fun writing these characters that I want to ask George if I could keep the characters together for a while and write some of the bigger arcs for George so that he can use it as a marketing vehicle. But Lawrence Kasdan isn't that kind of writer. He's in that kind of guy who is like a Kevin Feige who wants to create the universe and maintain it and try to bring everybody together and sit them down and say, I wanted an overall goal. And George Lucas wasn't in that mindset at the time. He just liked that people were playing in a sandbox. So if that was the way history went in regards to the expanded universe, then this is the film that we would have gotten. We would have got something that tied in with the books, but was very approachable to the audiences, because regardless of the history that you did not read, you would have been able to understand that these characters had been through some shit while you were gone not reading these books. And for all the fans, they would have been on the edge of their seat, because now that we're doing movies, it might be time to say goodbye to some of these characters, but it would be done in a way that was so respectful to those fans that stuck around and read all these stories of their childhood heroes, that way everyone would have won. And unfortunately, George Lucas was not the progenitor of the shared universe. Kevin Feige is. And now we have to live in this world where we have two disjointed universes. We have the Disney canon universe that is the Star Wars movies, the Clone Wars cartoon, Rebels, Resistance, the sequel trilogy, maybe a couple of things here and there that they just crib over time, and and some books that people either like or really don't like, the Chuck Wendig Aftermath series. And then over here on the left is the old universe, the expanded universe, what is now called Star Wars Legends, which is a macrocosm of Star Wars as an experience between thousands of or hundreds of book titles, thousands of issues of comics, video games, all done in-house by LucasArts, toy lines that, take even the concept art of Star Wars characters and make them into alternate costumes. There's so much to be going off this universe. And what the Disney people, the story group, Lawrence Kasdan, J.J. Abrams, now Chris Terrio, Rian Johnson, all these guys, and the only one who I think gets it from the original group on the left was John Knoll, who did Rogue One, is that you can't just steal the idea of the Star Wars movie, because Star Wars is essentially built off a stolen idea. And that's what J.J. Abrams fundamentally doesn't understand about his favorite filmmaker, Steven Spielberg, and his other favorite filmmaker, George Lucas. Those were two film students who loved old movies so much that they ended up creating careers based on the conventions of older movies. And as a result, they were seen as visionaries because they were taking the past and bringing it into the future and making it fresh and fun and inviting and exciting for everyone. And what J.J. Abrams does is a shallow imitation of that. And more importantly, the second big point about J.J. Abrams, beyond being a shallow imitator, is that he is a corporate fucking stooge. Like, if you know anything about this guy, is that he is always spinning the wheels for the machine. Like, he loves working inside the system. He's a company man, and he's not going to buck. And what he doesn't understand about George Lucas is that George Lucas was a fucking maverick. George Lucas did not give a shit about the bylines, about, the quotas, about any of this garbage that, has permeated Hollywood since, like, the new Hollywood era. And because George Lucas and Steven Spielberg were artists. Steven still is, but George is now just kind of a businessman. And what he doesn't understand about this crazy new Hollywood era is that they were all in this kind of crazy experimental phase where the studios were allowing young filmmakers to just run wild. And he does not run wild. He doesn't know how to run wild. He can only run in a straight line. If you were to tell him to go off the beaten path, he'd fucking freak out. Because this is the kind of man he is. He is a corporate stooge. He pays attention to, what is going on inside the culture of Hollywood. We have this article here from The Guardian that I remember very clearly, and I'll get to that after I read, that J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot introduces diversity quota. And this was after the Oscar So White controversy, where a bunch of fucking people were mad that, it was all white movies. And it was just... And this, I believe, was 2 years after, the great kind of long march into the culture started with Gamergate and with all that shit. And I will get to Gamergate someday, but Gamergate, what a lot of you fucking internet people don't know is that it had a lot of ramifications on the entertainment industry because these activists went further, and they have not publicized the fact that they did go further. They did go into the other entertainment industries and say, we need to change, we need to do better, we need to diversify the entire, industry, and we need to tell straight white men to shut the fuck up. And this is one of the ways he did. He said we've been working to improve our internal hiring practices for a while, but the Oscars controversy was a wake-up call to examine our role in expanding opportunities internally at Bad Robot and externally with our content and partners. We're working to find a rich pool of representative kick-ass talent and give them the opportunity they deserve and we can all benefit from. It's good for audiences and it's good for the bottom line. And as we all know, there's this saying, get woke, go broke. It's very simple. A lot of people have had to learn over time. Tim Miller, Elizabeth Banks, who's being shielded from it. And, there's so many people who have to learn from this fucking lesson. Get woke, go broke. And they're not learning it. And what we can see the year before, when he was at San Diego Comic-Con trying to hype up The Force Awakens, is this fucking shit right here. And you have heard some of this shit before if you have watched the Sargon review of The Last Jedi. He quotes this, this panel question that was turned into an article right here from CNET. I think it's important people see themselves represented in film. I think it's not a small thing. And, the big premise before he went into that was, woo, I love Asians! Like, you might remember that a lot more. But we now live in a post-The Force Awakens world. We live in a world where Rian Johnson directed The Last Jedi and took that, very simple Force Awakens movie that took no risks, that was a remake nearly of Episode 4 New Hope, and left J.J. Abrams in a fucking pickle. But before J.J. Abrams signed on to The Rise of Skywalker, there was a director. He made a movie about dinosaurs, and he was handpicked by Steven Spielberg. His name is Colin Trevorrow. Disney picked him to do The Rise of Skywalker first, and he said no, specifically because of how The Last Jedi fucked Luke Skywalker and raped him. And I might be using harsh language right now, but it's because I am finally coming around to that Last Jedi is not only irredeemable, not only a piece of shit, but it is going to be the divide in the sand between people who fucking suck Rian Johnson's dick forever and people who want to skin him alive. And a lot of, us people on the ground are people who want to skin Rian Johnson alive for what he fucking did with the Last Jedi. But I gotta tell you guys, J.J. Abrams is way worse. J.J. Abrams believes in the diversity initiative. He believes in the studio is the boss and I have to listen to everything they say. He is the corporate toady. He is that, oh gee, boss, I think that's a great idea. Shut the fuck up. He is that character in a fucking mafia movie. And what we all need to realize is that when the Rise of Skywalker hits and it's not good, and he does shit like recently saying that, oh, the Darth Plagueis scene in the prequels is amazing, but doesn't really go into any detail about it. This guy is no fucking idea what he's talking about. And before I wrap up, there is one final point between being the toady, being incompetent, being this kind of being this kind of this hack who steals, being this clown for the corporations. J.J. Abrams believes in this grand narrative device called the mystery box. What the mystery box is that don't show what's in the box, threaten to show what's in the box. Except there's nothing in that fucking box, okay? He does not create plans to be used later down the ride. It's a marketing ploy to get people interested in the movie. However, The Last Jedi has so fucking ruined Star Wars that there is a problem in that no one is interested in The Rise of Skywalker. And he doesn't know this, and Kathleen Kennedy doesn't know this, and Bob Iger doesn't know this, Alan Horn doesn't know this. All these fucking people don't know that this is an issue, that we don't have, something to hook the audience in anymore. We did with 2 movies. We're not going to with this 3rd one. People have fucking learned their lesson, and they learned way better on The Last Jedi than they did The Force Awakens. And I guess we're just going to have to find out in the middle of the month, come December 20th, and see. But before I go, there is one final J.J. Abrams piece of information that everybody should know. If he is a toadie, then he is like the king toadie, because all of his little toadies are all over the entertainment industry. I mentioned Alex Kurtzman earlier. Alex Kurtzman is now running Star Trek Discovery and pissing off that fandom like you wouldn't believe. Damon Lindelof, co-writer of Lost, creator of The Leftovers show and the abysmal Watchmen show that just had its 7th episode yesterday, and I gotta say, fuck you, you little Jew. Like, you suck. I hate you. Like, that was awful. That was so cringy. And, you know, I don't know why my girlfriend likes it, but, dude, I will fucking hunt you down, Damon Lindelof. Michelle Ragewan is at, whatchamacallit. She's the head of content production at Lucasfilm. So the stench of J.J. Abrams will not wash off that company for a very long time, unfortunately. Like, it just... Everywhere he goes, he puts in his people. And he now has something like a 5-picture deal. No, a $250 million 5-year deal producing content with HBO, Warner Brothers, under the Warner Media umbrella, which was recently purchased by AT&T. There have been rumors that he's going to do a Superman movie, that he's going to produce a Green Lantern movie. If you like those characters, you raise a fucking stink online and say, no, we do not want this hack and clown to fuck with anything anymore. Look what he did to Star Wars, especially if The Rise of Skywalker is everything those leaks have been saying. Because let me tell you, ladies and germs, J.J. Abrams is a fucking hack and a fucking clown. And Hollywood, if you do not tread lightly when it comes to the subject of J.J. Abrams, you are going to lose it all.